During the unrest following Floyd's death, Minneapolis and St. Paul turned into what some described as a war zone. Businesses were burned, and law enforcement seemed almost paralyzed. Walz's critics argue that he allowed chaos to reign, prioritizing political correctness over public safety. On immigration, Walz has been soft, advocating for more lenient policies, as well as very controversial initiatives such as driver's license for all and taxpayer-funded healthcare tuition to the illegal or undocumented, how the progressives say it, immigrants. While his supporters see it as compassion, others worry that it undermines national security. Welcome to the Freedom is Not Free channel, everyone. Today we're diving deep into the latest political development in the United States. Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, being chosen as the vice presidential running mate for Kamala Harris. We'll break down what this means for domestic policy, but more importantly, we'll explore the potential implications for Taiwan and the broader international community. So let's get right into it. Tim Walz's political record in Minnesota offers a preview of what we might see on a national scale. As governor, Walz has leaned heavily into progressive policies. He's pushed for a carbon-free power grid, aiming to make Minnesota a leader in environmentalism, which didn't prove to be any good for the state's economy. And it's also his handling of the George Floyd protest that might raise some eyebrows. During the unrest following Floyd's death, Minneapolis and St. Paul turned into what some described as a war zone. Businesses were burned, and law enforcement seemed almost paralyzed. Walz's critics argue that he allowed chaos to reign, prioritizing political correctness over public safety. On immigration, Walz has been soft, advocating for more lenient policies, as well as very controversial initiatives such as driver's license for all and taxpayer-funded healthcare tuition to the illegal or undocumented, how the progressives say it, immigrants. While his supporters see it as compassion, others worry that it undermines national security. And then there is his approach to economic and social policy. Walz has raised state spending significantly, expanded social programs, and has pushed for stricter gun control measures, including additional background checks. In his own words, one person's socialism is another person's neighborliness.
Don't ever shy away from our progressive values. One person's socialism is another person's neighborliness.
But how does this translate to the national stage if he becomes vice president? Now let's shift to foreign policy, where the stakes are even higher. Tim Walz's selection as Kamala Harris's running mate could signal certain shift in US policy towards Taiwan and China. Unlike some of his Democratic colleagues, Walz has shown support for human rights in Hong Kong and Tibet. He's even hosted Joshua Wong and Tibetan officials in exile. He also served on the Congressional Executive Commission on China, which scrutinizes Beijing human rights abuses. But there are also some different signals here. While Walz might talk tough on human rights, he is also a proponent of dialogue and cooperation with China on trade and climate change. This two-faced approach, where criticism on human rights is paired with collaboration in other areas, has been a hallmark of democratic administration since Bill Clinton. This could spell trouble for Taiwan, in my opinion.
I don't fall into the category that China necessarily needs to be an adversarial relationship. I totally disagree, and I think we need to stand firm on what they're doing in the South China Sea. But there's many areas of cooperation that we can work on. And when I was in China this past November, I got to have supper with their agricultural minister and talked about the issues. And some of the issues that were facing him were the same things facing us. It has opened, I think, channels of collaboration that I've been able to talk to the Chinese, because when we're on the same sheet of music, the world's, two of the world's great superpowers, there's many collaborative things we can do together. So I'm hopeful on that.
Because Taiwan needs allies who will stand firm against China's expansionism. With Walz, there is a concern that the US might not take as strong a stance as necessary. While Walz, quote-unquote, understands China, how some put it, having spent time there, critics argue that understanding might make him more complacent rather than assertive. We saw a similar scenario with Kurt Campbell, who, despite his experience, was soft on China, and what he lacked the most is the understanding of the dangers coming from the communist regimes. And this brings us to the most critical point. Walz has not explicitly supported Taiwan. This could mean that under a Harris-Walz administration, Taiwan might find itself in a precarious position, facing an emboldened China that misunderstands the US's willingness to cooperate on certain areas as weakness. Yes, there will be extended cooperation with Taiwan also, but as it's always with the Democrats, they might be hesitant in crossing some China's red lines, meaning less direct support to Taiwan. Walz has also expressed support for the Iran nuclear deal, a move that has been met with significant concern in Israel. This stance suggests a willingness to engage with regimes that have historically been hostile towards Israel, potentially putting strain on the US-Israel alliance. Tim Walz's response to the Israel-Hamas conflict has drawn criticism for being perceived as soft on Hamas. In the aftermath of the brutal Hamas attack on October 7th, Walz addressed a congregation at the Beth El Synagogue, urging for moral clarity in condemning the violence. However, in the following weeks, his public statement struck a more conciliatory tone. Walz emphasized that the vast majority of Palestinians are not Hamas and called for a permanent working ceasefire shortly after the conflict began. While he acknowledged Israel's right to defend itself, Walz also stressed the need to protect Palestinian civilians, which some critics argued downplays the threat posed by Hamas and undermines Israel's efforts to eliminate the terrorist organization. His approach has been seen as an attempt to balance both sides, but it has raised concerns that his stance might not fully align with Israel's and US security interests. What is particularly telling is that Kamala Harris chose Tim Walz over other potential VP candidates, such as Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania. Shapiro, who is from a crucial swing state, is known for his more moderate Israel stance and deep connections within the Jewish community. Shapiro's background and policy positions could have provided Israel with a more reliable ally in the White House, particularly countering threats from Iran and other adversaries in the region. His clear and consistent support for Israel contrasts sharply with Walz's more cautious approach. By choosing Walz over Shapiro, Harris may be signaling a shift in how the US will handle its relationships with Israel. While Walz has shown some support for Israel, his backing of the Iran deal and his less assertive stance compared to Shapiro suggests that Israel might not receive the same level of unwavering support under Harris-Walz administration. So what does this all mean in the bigger picture? Domestically, Walz's position could lead to a further divide in the US, with progressives rallying behind him, while conservatives and moderates might view his agenda as too radical. Internationally, the implications are just as significant. Taiwan's future could be at risk, and US relations with key allies like Israel may be strained. The choice of Tim Walz as Kamala Harris's VP is not just a domestic issue, it's a global one. From environmentalism to immigration, from human rights to Taiwan sovereignty, Walz's influence could shape the future of the US policy at home and abroad. The stakes have never been higher. Thanks for watching. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe and hit that notification bell to stay updated on the latest in global politics. Let me know your thoughts on Tim Walz and Kamala Harris, and also what do you think this VP pick means to the world? See you next time. Bye!